just fed up, and I think it's time for a change.
Raising black kids in America, I'm scared as hell.
I'm sorry to say, if you don't see it, I mean, you must be blind or something.
We have leverage right now. We have a moment in time. We want justice.
Yes.
And that's what we are here. That's what we're going to do today.
All right, three faces that are around our NBA broadcasts on Sportsnet and also been around the game of basketball their entire lives at every different level. It's Paul Jones, Sherman Hamilton, and Alvin Williams. The NBA gets a lot of credit for its diversity, guys, when it comes to minority owners, when it comes to women in refereeing and coaching and front office positions. Sherm, are you satisfied with what your sport and what the NBA has done to be a leader given what's going on right now around the world?
I wouldn't say satisfied, Brad. I'd say that there's good momentum, there's good initiatives, there's good intentions with what the NBA is doing, and I believe the NBA has done a very good job of being a leader amongst the four major sports in terms of their diversity and their willingness and their determination to make sure that they have that at every level. But I wouldn't call it satisfied. I'd call it a progress in motion.
Jonesy, I'll get Alvin's thoughts right after you on how far the NBA has come or how far they have to go, but take us back to where things were, say, 2 decades ago.
Well, I mean, the NBA, let's face it, when David Stern came in as commissioner, the NBA had some issues, and he did a good job of straightening that out. And as Sherm said, it's like running a marathon. They've come a long way, but there is a long way to go. And I think that was probably the start of, and to me, a lot of it boils down to economics. That was the start of giving African-American players some economic footing, some stable economic footing. And now you see it moving forward with athletes, in acquiring generational wealth and then not being afraid, feeling comfortable and safe in the system to speak up. So, I mean, I think that was established years ago. And let's face it, there were other guys years ago that were willing to make it a platform and put it forward. And I think we're still hearing from him now. I think of, Lou Alcindor, when he changed his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was part of that meeting in Cleveland before the '68 Olympics, and he chose not to go.
And you mentioned off camera Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, who refused to stand for the anthem or recognize it, bowed his head, and he heard the feedback now, and we still talk to him about that. Alvin, do you remember, either for you or players that you played with, where you were given sort of strict instructions not to speak out and not to protest, so to speak?
No, from a business standpoint and from silent whispers, you understood things that you could say and things that you couldn't say and things that you could do. I remember, national anthem, you had to sit there, you had to stand like hands by your side or in your back or in the front. You couldn't go side to side. So they gave you different things, certain limitations and rules by that. But, the NBA is based on perception and it's all about what they're thought about. So I really believe that the NBA have a tremendous ability to make a great impact collectively. And Jonesy hit it right on the head. It comes down to economics. And that's the thing that's going to water down possibly the ultimate issue at hand, which is the social injustices.
Well, Sherman, we talked last spring about the power of sport. I mean, almost 10 million people watching the same thing at the same time when the Raptors won their championship. So take that power of sport to a different level with even more at stake now. Is there any doubt that athletes and leagues like this that are in the spotlight can make a difference towards change?
Well, I believe sport has always been able to make a difference. I think now it's just got to spew outside of the arena, outside of the field of play, and it's got to be a very significant impact based on what's happening socially around the world. So these are players. These are players who have a platform and who have money, but they don't have billionaire money like a lot of the owners in this league does. So they've got to use their platform wisely. And if the goal is to create social justice, especially for minorities, especially for Black minorities, then I think that has to be focused on, that has to be deliberate. It has to be a process that is determined to have requests and demands put in place. And it's also got to be something that is not just talked about for the next month or so. It's got to be something that's hammered home until those demands and those requests are met.
And Paul, you had Wayne Embry on the radio a couple of days ago, and you asked him, and he's been through everything with this for sure for a long time. And you asked him why he has confidence that this one might take.
The common goal is for equality. The common goal is to, for African Americans in the U.S. and people of color around the world to flesh out racism. And in talking to Wayne Embry, who, his wife marched in the South in Selma, and he was the guy who basically founded helped found the Players Association, and the first African-American general manager. And, Wayne tells us stories about playing and going to towns like St. Louis in the 60s where he had to eat in the kitchen and had to stay with families, couldn't stay in the hotel, and those kinds of things. The goal is for equality. And right now, everybody has to focus on that. And, Wayne was encouraged, and I'm a child of the 60s, and you go back to it. Now we've got people who have the ability to make change, siding with or getting in line with the minorities that want the change. So now you've got everybody focused on a common goal, and people are finally saying this has to change. And it's the diversity of the group that's demanding change that has me hopeful going forward.
Alvin, you bridged the gap from the end of Michael Jordan's career to the baton being passed to LeBron James as the new face of the league. Michael, as we know, chose not to speak out on a lot of things. We won't get into that, but LeBron has taken on that role now, and it gets greater and greater. How important is that from the player's standpoint, where the guy in the league sets that tone?
I mean, if LeBron James, as great as a player he is, if he's not the guy or the person that should be speaking out on these things, then it's not going to be productive. So, but luckily for us and for everyone, he is the guy that talented, visible, and everything like that can speak on a high level of all of these things. And I think that is a great thing when you have a guy that's leading the force and leading the charge like a LeBron James. But I would like to talk about, when we talk about sports making a difference and making a change, I think it definitely can, but it has to make it from the model of sports, right? We can't use sports as a society for entertainment and bring people together from a fan standpoint. But if you look at it, sports or a successful model, you see the intricacies and the inner workings of a successful thing that comes together, and everyone will benefit from it.
Alvin brought up an interesting point, but we're talking about what sport does, and we're talking about players and using their platform. But understand, this is a systemic issue. This is an issue that is not coming from the bottom up where the players are playing the game. It's coming from the top down. So now we've got to look at it and say, well, a lot of focus is on the players and using their platform and what sport can do. Well, hold on a second. What about the people that own teams, that run the leagues, the people involved on that level of organizations? That, to me, is where the change has to happen.
And Sherm, just to punctuate that and follow that, the good thing in the NBA is we're starting to see minority owners. We're starting to see people that have diverse points of view and want that inclusion and diversity, pushing the other owners. It's tough when you don't have a seat at the table. As Sherm said, when it comes from the top down, they need people that are pushing for that. They need people, and what better way to have minority owners? The NBA's got 3 of them. They're ahead of the curve. They're not, the marathon's still not over yet. There's still a long way to run, but at least they've got their shoes on and they're moving in the right direction.
For this issue to be taking place and really be impactful, that the dollar signs have to be thrown out the window, how much you can, right? So that's the most difficult part, and that's the most upsetting part, because something as serious as this, it's always going to be viewed as, all right, what's the bottom line? Because this is a business, this is a corporation. So collectively, the economic piece has to take a back seat until it's used to a point that we can change the system. We can put things in order, like as Sherm talked about, because it starts from the top. And I think, once again, I'm going over with it, but that economic piece, somehow it always waters down the ultimate message and the ultimate drive, if we allow it to.
Guys, great perspective from all 3 of you. We appreciate you joining us. Thanks for this.